for the presentation of Dr. Roel van de Veen, who is the head of the political affairs at the Royal Netherlands Embassy in Jakarta. He is an expert on development studies and has written extensively on African studies. But he's also written some on Asia. He published a book in 2010 on why Asia is becoming rich and powerful in Amsterdam, Waarom Azië rijk en machtig wordt. And he's also written on India's road to development. Professor van de Veen obtained a PhD in history at the University of Groningen on the topic of the disintegration of states in Africa, and in this morning he will talk about the relationship between Indonesia and the Netherlands. So without further ado, I think we'll let Professor van de Veen to start.
Thank you very much. Selamat pagi. Saya selalu senang berada di sini di Jogja. Saya betul belajar beberapa bahasa Indonesia di sini di UGM itu 25 tahun yang lalu dengan istri saya, Maghrib. Ini kali kedua saya kerja di Indonesia. Kali pertama ini 92 sampai 95 masih masa zaman Orde Baru. Dan saya kembali ke Indonesia bulan November yang lalu, masih baru tapi kenal Indonesia sedikit. Then I can speak a little bit from my own experience here in Indonesia. As I was introduced, well, I always have two jobs. One is in the Kementerian Luar Negeri Belanda. They pay my salary. I'm very thankful for that. So I work in The Hague at the headquarters, and sometimes at the embassy, like now, in the embassy in Jakarta. But on the side, it's like my hobby. I do academic work, and that is closely connected to my work as a diplomat. Because in my work, I always use knowledge from academia. I have a lot of projects. I was for 10 years in the Kementerian. I was the academic advisor. So I was trying to bring together academic knowledge and diplomatic practice. You may wonder why I'm walking around a bit. Paint my back hurts very much. I cannot sit. So when saya harus duduk terus, tidak bisa berdiri lagi. So I maaf ya. But it's good for the interaction. I hope we can interact a bit. Yesterday I was here and I talked really about my, let's say, my specialization, which is development. I worked a lot with Africa, with Asia. So yesterday in the facultas Sosial dan Politik, saya kira, I talked about why poor countries usually remain poor and why they sometimes become richer, like Indonesia. Why did that happen? When did it happen and why? You missed that. Well, was there anybody yesterday here? Apart from Leo from the embassy? No, I don't. So you missed that all. Thank God for you. That was easy for me because that's my specialty. Then Mudarika, she's going after the coffee, I think. She organized this, and I thought, well, if I have to talk at the faculty for anthropology, I better do something about cultures. Now the problem is, I never done that before. So this is really the first time, and because of my back, I really didn't have any preparations. I asked my intern and the trainee at the embassy to look for some pictures. He did that. So this is going to be kind of an experiment. I took as my starting point, how did Dutch and Indonesian culture interact? Did they interact? And I want to go through that with you based on the knowledge I gained from Indonesia, the knowledge that I have from Dutch history, and the experience I got here in Indonesia over the last 25 years. So that's my starting point. Don't expect from me any deep knowledge about cultures in the sense, definitions and so on. I don't know, let's not bother about it. That's your business. You are studying it, that's your business, right? I just want to share some experiences with you, and maybe you can give me some feedback. Let's interact on this. Is that okay? Well, it's not my intention to do any provocative things that I sometimes do. The Dutch can be blunt, as you know, but I try to be very gentle, even though my back hurts. Culture, you know, that can be from day-to-day life, what's there, the behavior of people, the things they use, material culture. It can be what they call in Dutch high culture, paintings and literature and so on. For me, it's all culture. I don't make any distinctions there. And I take science and scholarship as a unity. Usually we break it up and we put some things behind it so that one cannot connect to the other. For me, I mean, we need that for organizational purposes, but it's much better to see it as a unity knowledge, right? So that's why I dare to venture into the field of anthropology, even though I lack the background. So, how to start? I think we have to look both at Dutch culture and culture in Indonesia, see where they interact, and take it from history in different periods. And of course we got the two big, we got the colonial period and we got the period since independence, right? Let's make that distinction. And start first with the colonial period, but first about the interaction. Usually it's not so clear where did it start, what is the causal chain, the explanation, what is the cause and what is the effect. The Dutch and Indonesians have interacted for a long time, and so some people have said in a way the cultures look a little bit alike, even though we are geographically speaking far apart, very different environment. We are from the cold Europe and you are from the tropics. I mean, that of course that has some effects, and but still the interaction has been there throughout the time. And if you look at it from, let's say, a perspective, when Barack Obama visited the Netherlands and when he left, he said it has been a success because it has been very gezellig. You know what that means, gezellig? Kind of menyenangkan. It's cozy, I guess, in English, right? But in the Netherlands, things have to be gezellig. Then it's okay. And here, Indonesians are a bit like that. You like menyenangkan, right? Indonesians are what kind of gezellig also. Maybe we have influenced each other there. I don't know, but this is very different. For example, like the Germans in Europe, or the Chinese, or whatever, they're not gezellig. They are very different. They have other priorities. And then you could also say, from over the ages, we are a bit praktisch. We like to make things, and when they are rusak, just try to make it better and so on. Maybe the two cultures have influenced each other there as well. There's lots of space here. You don't have to sit so far in the back. Sorry for that. Please don't mind if you want to change or whatever you want to do. Okay. So this is, I think, maybe some very general influence, and then you can have, but important influence maybe how a culture acts, right? But then you can also look at the very small things. Of course, I'm wearing a batik today. That is influence of the Dutch here. If you go to the embassy, especially on a Friday, you will see all the, not even only the local staff, also the Indonesian staff, the Dutch staff, the expats, all wearing batik. 25 years ago, no way. But batik in Indonesia 25 years ago during Orde Baru was a very different thing. They, like the civil servants, all wore the same. It was usually the yellow Golkar batik. Very disciplined. Now if you go to, let's say, high places with the top of the Indonesian ministries, or you go to weddings or whatever, so nice, they all have the various colors. Indonesia has become very colorful in 25 years. 25 years ago, most of you were not born, right, 25 years ago. But I can clearly see the difference there in the clothes people wear. Much richer, much more colorful, all that. So, but the other way around as well, when we walked up there, Mumbarika, maybe, will you give a big hand for Mumbarika? Thank you, and thank you so much for the coffee. If you can put the music through it, then I can.
How much like?
Yeah, I'll make it two. Okay. When we walked up here on the square, there was the sign Zoetmulder. It was a Gedung Zoetmulder, the Javanologist, right, from the Netherlands. That is a kind of, it has influenced also the studies here very much in Indonesia, from Javanese to all kinds of things. The Borobudur is right around the corner. It was already renovated a long time ago by Dutch archaeologists. So there's the interaction. But those are things that you can see, let's say, immediately. But if we start in history, and let's do it a little bit more systematic, you know, when the Dutch first came to these islands, and of course the word Indonesia did not exist, the country Indonesia did not exist, there was no Indonesian culture. What did they find here? All very different cultures from the islands, very loosely connected, with characteristics that later were called adat. I mean, there was no way you could imagine Indonesia in those days. What was Dutch culture like? It was very much a commercial culture. Merchants going through, let me give you a nice picture of that. These are merchant houses in Amsterdam. They were mostly built in the 17th century. This was the time of the VOC, the East India Company of the Netherlands. East Indies Company, I should say. And they came to Indonesia not to occupy the place, to conquer the place. I mean, they had no ideas about that. They wanted to make money. That was the idea. Why did they build ships and go all the way to Indonesia? And I say all the way, maybe in those times distance was very different. Now we complain a lot, let's say the Netherlands and Indonesia are far from each other. But if you take the plane, you can be tomorrow in the Netherlands. It's so easy. But in our minds, the distance has grown. I don't think there was a big distance for the people in VOC times. A difference is also a construct in your head. Depends very much on how you think about this. While the distance actually has become, well, the distance is always the same, but to connect has become so much easier. But in our minds, the distance has grown. And where were all those spices? Mainly in Maluku. The first islands the VOC wanted to go is Tidore and Ternate. And then from there the spices were spread over Maluku, Ambon, Banda Islands and so on. And the Dutch established, it was not free trade in those days. A lot of trade in Asia was kind of free trade, but the Dutch wanted to have it all. They wanted to monopolize it. So they established territorial power in Maluku and from headquarters in Jakarta, which they called Batavia in those days. Those are the two places really in the archipelago that had Dutch colonialism for 3.5 centuries. In all the other places, it happened much later. Many of the islands never saw any Dutch. Some of the islands had colonialism, let's say, for 50 years, like in Bali, not even 30, 40 years. So if they talk about a long time of colonialism, of course in some places, but certainly not all over the archipelago. So if you want to look for interactions between the cultures, you really have to look where is that. That would be in Maluku, that would be Batavia, Jakarta. Here in Yogyakarta, it started at the beginning of the 19th century. And you had, of course, the so-called Java War, with Prince Diponegoro and so on. That was when colonialism was really established in this part of the country. So that is, how long ago? 1.5 century, 2 centuries? This is the fort in Tidore. No, Ternate, sorry, Fort Orange. And of course, what was the culture like? I said it was Maluku and it was Batavia. Here we had a look at Batavia. I think the Dutch. No? Just continue. Let's call it the high Dutch officials, like the one on to your right. They behave as if nothing had changed, as if they had not gone to the tropics. They kept the same clothes that they would wear in Amsterdam. They tried to get the same food. They walked around, but then, of course, they had a lot of Bambantu and even slaves. In those days, in the early days of Batavia, Jakarta, it was a very cosmopolitan city. It was a small city, of course, but the Dutch were not a majority. They were a minority, and you had their Dutch people. You had, of course, Malay people. You had Javanese people, Sundanese. You got Moluccans coming in as soldiers. You had Buginese. From Bali, they were mostly slaves. It was a time of slavery. But then you had also Portuguese still living there. You had British. You had Chinese. Yeah, I mean, more than 10 very different ethnic communities. It was like what they say later of New York, a melting pot. Jakarta has never been as cosmopolitan as in the very first years. Later on, it became much more, let's call, many foreigners left Jakarta in later centuries, and all the Indonesian people were Indonesianized. You could not really, now these days it's very difficult to distinguish a Balinese from a Javanese, from a Achinese, from a, it's all kind of the same culture. So if you go around Jakarta, whereas in many places you would say cities have become cosmopolitan, Jakarta has become much less cosmopolitan. It was cosmopolitan in the 17th century. just some, these were slaves in the East Indies. People go there a lot in the evening to be there, very gezellig. This is 17th century. And we see in the 20s, and we see it now in 2017. Well, if you really go into the square, you see all the young people usually sitting there, making music and being Sena. So, this was mostly the time of the colonial era, and then we go into, let's say, the second part of the colonial era, after the company VOC went bankrupt. That was at the end of the 18th century, right? It went bankrupt. Almost all of Holland went bankrupt. It was the time of Napoleon in France, the French Revolution. Napoleon went around Europe, conquering most of the countries. He also conquered the Netherlands. We became again a republic under France, and then became part of the French Empire. And then what happened here in Indonesia? The British came. The British were the big opposition to the French, and the French ruled Europe, but Britain rules the waves, as they say. And they also got all the colonies of European countries, including the Dutch ones, including Indonesia. So you got a new Governor General, this time not from Belanda, but from English, Raffles. You know? Thomas Raffles, very well known. He has been, he was in Indonesia not for a long time, but he had been a big influence, both on the Dutch and on the Indonesians. After that he went on to Singapore, where again he had a big influence. One of the things that he said about the Dutch here in Indonesia, I mentioned that the high officials of the Dutch tried to behave European. But it was very difficult because, first of all, you could not have a European family here. There were no Dutch wives here. So the wives usually take care of kind of the culture in the house, right? Well, if they're not there, how are you going to do that? They usually had local wives, which they were called nyais, and they had children. So the children were mixed European, Indonesian, and Dutch we call that Indo. Is that a word that rings a bell? Indo, mixed blood. So the culture in the house, apart from, let's say, official business, was very Indonesianized, localized, kind of controlled by the local wives, with the children with different backgrounds, mingling with the Dutch, with the local culture, and talking the language that was there, the Malay language. The Dutch learned Malay, so that is also something that they assimilated to the local situation. That is very different from most other colonizing peoples from Europe. Take first of all the Portuguese and the Spanish. One of their main motivations to conquer other peoples and to go outside Europe was to bring their religion, Catholicism, to other places. You still see that in Southeast Asia, you still see that in the Philippines, right? They're Catholics. The Dutch did not want to spread the Dutch religion because they thought that would bring unrest and that would be harmful to profits. Remember, the Dutch came here for money, to get profits, and they thought if we're going to try make everybody Calvinistic, Protestant religion, then there will be unrest in the country and we cannot trade, so we don't do that. Also, there's the difference, for example, with the French. The French always want other people like the French, to speak their language, to behave like them, to eat like the French. The Dutch, again, didn't care. If the French had gone here, this meeting would take place in French. They would never have learned local language. We would be talking French now. And you might have been Catholics. So that's the coincidence of history, right? In a way, you're not very Dutch in many ways. And we come to that later when I draw my conclusions. And I will ask you for your conclusions. You're not very Dutch. That's because we only came for the money. And we just wanted to keep it quiet and trade and have the economy and so on. So the influence on culture is different. Also from the British. But the British didn't bring religion and language and so on. What the British did, the British are very conscious of their own position, of their own. The Dutch are not very conscious of being Dutch either. Being British is something. Being Dutch, you may wonder what that is, being Dutch. Yeah, blunt we say, but yeah, what's that? I mean, it's not much. Being British is something. So when Raffles came to Indonesia and he looked at the Dutch people here going native, as you can, behaving, living pretty much like local people here. Then Raffles said, what are you doing? You're Europeans. How can you do this? Why are you mixing so much with local culture? And the Dutch said, well, okay. It was really the first time they became conscious of that, what had happened in 2 centuries of VOC presence in Indonesia. So for the first time, the VOC had gone, right? Bankrupt. But after the British left, there was a big trade-off of colonial territories, and it was decided the Dutch could come back to Indonesia, to these islands. So it was no longer the VOC, it was the Dutch state. And the separation is really when the Suez Canal was opened. That was in 1869. Until the Suez Canal was opened, the journey from the Netherlands to Indonesia was still very long. Sailing ships, it was a month to come here. But with the opening of the Suez Canal, the months became weeks. It took a few weeks to come here. That's a big difference. And the ships became bigger, and they got steam engines. It was no longer sailing. They got the motors, so it became all easier. So many more people came to Indonesia. From the British until the opening of the Suez Canal, it was again mainly administrators, soldiers, and merchants. The economy, the occupation, and the administration. That was mainly it. No, male, no wives. After the Suez Canal, wives came, and for the first time, the Dutch could have European families in Indonesia. So it was only at the end of the 19th century, only at the end of colonialism, really. And other peoples came, because you got for the first time missionaries. I said the Dutch didn't want to spread religion, but you got some missionaries, and that was a tense relationship between the missionaries and the state, because the state would not allow them, but they were free to enter. So that was a tension between those. But you got scholars and scientists studying Indonesia, the languages, the islands, the the animals that were living here, the volcanoes, all that. Very interesting. Many scientists came to Indonesia to study it. And other groups, I mean, more people, just adventurous, just to look at Indonesia. So many more Dutch people came here, and after 1870, the start of some Dutch European culture in Indonesia could be seen. But this is really, I would say, a view from the 19th century. The country was still relatively empty, right? I think at the time of independence, Indonesia had around 70 million people. Now it's 260 to 70, so that is almost four times as much, right? At the time of VOC, these islands were mostly empty. It's a big difference, especially Java has been very full. The area here around Yogyakarta, of course, Jakarta even more full. But then, in the time of, you see the economy change, and that has of course influence on culture as well. The going after the spices, I mean, that was still nice, but it was no longer main business. Main business in the economy became plantation business. To grow things for the growing Dutch economy. You got consumers there that liked sugar, tea, coffee, tobacco, that kind of thing, right? And it was grown, especially here on Java, and later on also on Sumatra. North Sumatra, daily for tobacco. So in those, you got plantations with the big plantation owners who tried to be more or less European, and when the whites came over, you got the start of European culture there. Let me go through some. This is a coffee plantation. So those products were brought to the Netherlands and to other places in the world, and people actually started to drink coffee. I'll show. It's good. People like that. So that was good trade, good production, good trade. Also the sugar, the tea, all of that. That was a completely new phase in the economy because a market for that had appeared in Europe and in America, and it was the first time. Now, you see big changes and culture in Indonesia in those days. For the first time you really see, let's say, the colonial culture. There was colonialism before that, certainly, but the culture, let's say, built on separation, one group working for the others. Some people say white supremacy, that kind of mentality started to appear in Indonesia. And on the other hand, you saw, of course, the exploitation of local people by the colonialists. So, at the end of the lecture, we have together maybe draw some conclusions, but this is, I want to put this on the table. This is, of course, not a secret. This is very much, you know, this is not what the VOC did. The VOC were merchants and they got their administration. This is kind of Dutch officials going a bit, doing a bit the Eastern way. You would not even see this in the Netherlands because it's much too formal. This is the Governor General, and it must be in Batavia. Could also be in Buitenzorg in Bogor, but I guess it's Batavia. And all the pomp and circumstance of that. So this is more empire-like, right? What the British did, what the French did. And this is the Governor General with his family, sitting there in the palace. This could be, well no, it could not be in Europe, because the servants would be very different. This is really a colonial situation or an empire-like situation. This is in Batavia, the hotel where the Dutch went. Hotel des Andes does not exist anymore. There's now a big road there. It's close to the palace, the Istana Merdeka. This is how you could be served in the Des Andes hotel. There still is a Des Andes hotel in The Hague, a kind of colonial hotel. It's very beautiful and so on. It's a bit run down, but it was renovated again. But this colonial atmosphere, many of those officials that went to Indonesia to be administrators here, so after they retired to The Hague and lived there. So The Hague is kind of the counterpart to that. Most colonial things in the Netherlands you will see in The Hague. Of course, the Dutch brought many things from Indonesia, not only the plantation products, but also things from, let's say, art, things that people used in the houses, whatever, both high culture and low culture, and it was brought together in this new building, what started as the Royal Institute of the Tropics, the real colonial institute in Amsterdam. This is where you can still go there to Amsterdam to see a lot about Indonesia, a lot of the various ethnicities from the past. So it's really a colonial institute, and but it's still there. It of course it got a new name. All those institutes got new names, but what's inside is still more or less the same. Back to Des Andes. And now we go to Yogyakarta. My trainee was so kind for you to to insert a few pictures of the colonial past here in Yogyakarta. All 19th century, I guess. Well, you know this much better than I do. Damansari. This is Tanah Abang in Batavia. Now we come to some impact on the Netherlands again from Indonesia. I must be honest that I think what I said, the impact of the Netherlands on Indonesia has been limited, right? I think the other way from Indonesia to the Netherlands also. Most Dutchmen with their lives in the Netherlands in the 19th century would have very little idea about Indonesia or the connection with the Dutch with Indonesia. They might drink coffee or whatever, but that would be about it. The Netherlands had become, let's say, a second-rate country. At the time of the Compagnie, the Netherlands was one of the most powerful countries in the world, but being a small country, it could no longer compete with the real big countries like England or France and later US. I mean, they're much bigger, or Japan. So it only kept these islands as its colonial empire. All the rest was almost gone. Suriname was there, a few islands in the Caribbean, but that was mainly the end of it. And it's through smart diplomacy it could keep Indonesia. But the influence on the Netherlands was limited. But still, of course, there was some influence. What I show here some very well-known books in the Netherlands that are about the situation in Indonesia, the colonial situation. There's a lot of very interesting literature that still, after you read it, after more than a century, 2 centuries, it's still very interesting to read. I hope you have some of it in your libraries here. Couperus. I personally like Down very much. It's about life on the plantations. It's all written in Dutch. I guess some of it will be translated in Indonesian or English.
It's already translated in English.
In English, very good, very good.
Still not.
Oh yeah, that would be the silent power. What? How would it be translated?
Yeah.
Well, Couperus has another book called Guna Guna. I don't think that needs translation, right? No, let me see. Yeah? Down. Guna Guna. Oh, it's always good to bring your wife because she can correct you. She said Guna Guna was written by Down. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Right? Let me show a few more pictures. Well, the one that had most influence, I guess, was this guy. Anybody knows who this is? Who's the guy? He was a Dutch colonial official. The one on the left. What's his name? Max Havelaar. Well, he wrote Max Havelaar. Multatuli. And Multatuli is not even his name. It's his writer's name. Douwestek. Eduard Douwestek. That's his name. And he said, when I'm writing, I call myself Multatuli. That means in Latin the one who suffers a lot, because he thought the world was such a terrible place, and he thought about that and he suffered all the time. He was quite an ego. But he wrote about the Max Havelaar in the trading companies, like the coffee trade that I explained. And he said, we are exploiting, we the Dutch are exploiting the Indonesians too much. Or we are exploiting them. I think until Multatuli, there was not a discussion about exploitation. I think people just in those days kind of accepted it. It was the way it was. He was the first to bring this in the public debate. And it really made an impact. He really started a debate, and he had huge consequences. And many Indonesians still know him. He got now a museum in Rangkas Bitung in Lebak. And it's called the Anti-Colonial Museum, something like that. I'm not sure. Anti-colonial, I heard. Was that right? I think so. But there's a bit of a problem there. What if, I don't know who read, may I ask, who read the book, Max Havelaar? I read it 3 times, but I have to do maybe for my work. But you are students, you should have read it at least 1 time. Who done so? Bloemen? Nanti? Liburan berikutnya, yeah? It's a nice way to spend your holiday. It's an interesting view in your history, right? It's your history, also our history. That's why we interact. So next, Liburan, you will read Max Havelaar. But what's in there? Max Havelaar is kind of a hero in Indonesia, or Multatuli, or Eduard Douwestek, many names. It's all, let's say it's all the same. But what did he actually say? He wanted a better life for Indonesian people. Not Indonesian people, because the word Indonesia did not exist yet. For, let's say, local people. I think that is what the kind of words he used. And how? That is the interesting thing. Multatuli wanted better life for people, which, let's say, is a good thing, but how to do that? In those days, you could only think from the mental framework of colonialism. Colonialism was all around the world. The idea that these islands could be not on the European government was inconceivable. So he said, the Dutch have to do better. What do they have to do? They have to govern Indonesian peoples directly. What they did until then was indirect rule. It was you use the local princes and adat heads and heads of villages and what have you, all around, and you backed them up. It was the old style, let's say, feudalism, backed up by a colonial power. It actually made the feudalism stronger. Colonialism made the bad habits of the strong people in those days, made it worse. They used the old princes to exploit the people even more. And that was what Multatuli objected against. He said, get rid of all the local heads, the local princes, and govern Indonesia directly, in a modern way, in a more European way, not in a feudal way, but in a modern way, with, let's say, dignity for all and less poverty and so on. Because in Europe in the 19th century, development was going very fast. They already said there was a market that normal people could buy tea and coffee and all that. That was beginning to become normal in Europe. And he wanted to bring those things also to the colonies. That was the idea of Multatuli. So a better life through more colonialism. That's why I was a bit surprised about the name of the Multatuli Museum, because he was not anti-colonial. He was very colonial, but he wanted a better life for Indonesians. That was from that colonial state of mind, that was as far as you could think. That was already revolutionary. And this was an influence from, let's say, the colonial situation from Indonesia on the Netherlands, with a long, with many consequences until this day, because the Netherlands afterwards started indeed a new policy for East Indies, for Indonesia, around 1900, called the ethical policy. You should be ethical towards all the inhabitants of the empire. So looking much more at your economic situation, social situation, and so on. And this even survived after independence of Indonesia, and the Dutch lost the colonies in development cooperation. Many people in the Netherlands who work in development cooperation think they are something completely new, something of the new days. They are leftish, full of social empathy, and they are very much against everything that has to do with the colonies, right? Because they think the colonies were rightish, exploitation and so on. But there is a direct line from the ethical policy of the Dutch in Indonesia towards the development cooperation of now. At the time of independence, the administrators from the colonial government in Indonesia who worked for improving the welfare of the Indonesian people got new jobs in The Hague for development cooperation. So you see it even in individual careers. That's an influence from Indonesia on Dutch policy until this day. All starting with Multatuli, what he saw in Levak. Well, there are of course many call them big, call them small. This is, the Dutch tend to like Indonesian food. Maybe that's why they stayed so long here. We also do. The problem is there's so much nice food we cannot choose. So what do? In the end, one person wants this, another wants that, another they say bring it all in. And then of course the basis is rice and what they call rijsttafel. That is, if you go to the Netherlands and you say rijsttafel, everybody knows. You all know the word rijsttafel, right? It often happens when we go with friends, we go out having dinner in The Hague or someplace, and Indonesian dinner, many Indonesian restaurants, and say, what shall we eat? Well, let's do rijsttafel. We don't need to discuss that, we have it all. So this is a bit what the modern rijsttafel looks like, of course. Well, you have a look, you recognize it all. By the way, I talked about this with Margreet last evening about, Margreet is very knowledgeable about Indonesian cooking as well. She can cook, sorry for that. She can cook great Indonesian food. But she said there's also an influence of Dutch food on Indonesian food, going back a long way, especially in the vegetables. Many vegetables like bloemkool and others were unknown here in Indonesia, and it was the VOC who introduced it here. If you ever go to Cape Town, South Africa, Cape Town was founded by the VOC as a station on the way to Indonesia. The ships halfway they had to sail around Africa. On the southern tip of Africa is Cape Town. It was especially founded to grow vegetables. So all the VOC ships went there. It's very nice. They still have in the middle of the city. Cape Town has become a big city as well, but very interesting city. In the middle you have a huge area, a few soccer fields, still called the company garden, where the vegetables were grown that were brought to Indonesia. And some of them have become part of the Indonesian food. So that's interaction two ways. Well, of course, as I said, the Dutch like a lot Indonesian food. This is just what you can have in takeaway food, Indonesian, in The Hague, toko. Very well known, there are many. This is the most famous Indonesian restaurant in The Hague, Garuda. When we have official visitors, we often go here because it's very nice. And they make a great rijsttafel. It's right in the center next to the palace in The Hague. Back to Yogyakarta, some pictures from colonial times, the fort. Official Dutch, I think it's now it's a presidential palace, right? Going back to Jakarta, Batavia, the Kota Tua, that is interesting. Let's move on to independence times. And then I get to time for discussion. Right? A few words about independence times, because the story does not end in 45. And we have some direct experience with this cultural thing, cultural interaction from two periods, from the Orde Baru, when we lived here for 3 years, and now coming back. And I can already see that a lot has changed. One of the things that have changed in the 25 years is maybe you recognize it, is what is now called the Café Batavia in Taman Fatahila and Jakarta. 25 years ago, this is really the center of the old Batavia, the VOC Batavia. And this area, 25 years ago, was really a rundown area. It was totally neglected, nobody cared for it. nobody went there. I think it was maybe in the evening a bit dangerous even. You simply didn't go there. It was not fun to go there. But even before we left in '95, this building was bought by one entrepreneur and it was renovated and it was an immediate success. Café Batavia. Everybody liked it. This is how you sit there and you have a view over the square, and from that the next building was renovated and then the next. And what you see now, the colonial heritage is being renovated and it's made into a tourist attraction. But not only for the tourist, Indonesians can be tourists in their own city. A lot of people, including the students and so on, that's what I said at the beginning, they all just come together to have a nice time on Taman Fatahila among all the colonial buildings, and they think maybe for Indonesians that is exotic, I don't know, but at least they like it. So the Dutch heritage in the form of the buildings have become revalued. There was not during the Orde Baru, there was no value, and certainly not during the Orde Lama, the Sukarno time, and it just could fall apart. And I can fully understand because there were other priorities, right? But now there's more money, things have stabilized, and now Indonesians are willing to spend some money even on colonial heritage, and you see that in the center of Jakarta. But going to the culture and post-independence times, that of course has changed a lot, and it's very easy to divide the post-independence period into several eras, right? First, of course, the time of freedom, of Sukarno, kind of a revolutionary time, anti-colonial, maybe all trying social revolution and so on. But after, in '65, that fell apart. We got a new time, very different under Suharto, very disciplinary, everybody wearing the same batik, but also the time of the start of development, material development. And then again, we left for a long time and we returned just last year. A lot has changed in the Zaman Reformasi. And if you go through the different times here in Indonesia after independence, you could say it's a competition of various Indonesia trying to orientate itself in the world, which of course has repercussions for its culture. And I think the first one is just nationalism. You have a new country and you want to make it one. Indonesia was only one because of its colonial era. So the first cultural thing that has remained until this day is nationalism. It has been very successful. And if you look even until this day, you ask the candidates for the presidency, they all will say, first of all, they're nationalists. That's the safe thing, and that is the important thing for this country. So, you could say there's a Dutch influence because that nationalism is the reaction, the response to the history, right? The colonial history. But with that nationalism, anti-colonial, Indonesia also tries to position itself with other anti-colonial streams in the world, non-aligned. The Bandung Conference belongs to that, right? It's Indonesia as a new independent of everybody. Then another one is, of course, the social thing. Many liberation movements also want to get rid of the old system, kind of what Multatuli said. Get rid of the old feudal systems. They want not only an anti-colonial revolution, they also want a social revolution. And of course that was also tried in the first years of independence until 65. But it failed. So communism, socialism was becoming taboo in Indonesia. It still is taboo. But of course, social policies or not are pretty much part of the election campaign, right? The words have changed. But the issues, the challenges are still there. So that's a different stream in the orientation of Indonesia. The third one, of course, is Islam. Does Indonesia belong kind of to the Western world? Under Pak Harto that was done with repression of the political manifestations of Islam, or should it be more open? We could also say that is also part of the Western world, more openness, but that will mean more Islamization with influence from the Middle East. So there is this Islamic tradition, of course, in Indonesia, and a kind of a Western tradition. Now, and then you could say there's the regional tradition, started by Pak Harto after the confrontatiepolitiek from Sukarno. He built ASEAN. Now let's talk of enlarging ASEAN into an Indo-Pacific region with pretty much the values of Indonesia. So the last one I would say could be the Dutch connection. Of course, that's very tiny still. We Dutch, we know that. But there is still this kind of an orientation towards the Netherlands. You see that, and I can say that here at UBM, for students, both for your studies abroad, for your maybe PhD one day. Many of you go to Leiden, to other places, and Dutch universities, first of all Leiden, they built their reputation on the link with Indonesia, and still the best in the world when it comes to knowledge about Indonesia. Of course, there are some universities in Australia, US that also have it, depending on the particular field. But the universities in the Netherlands are very much, due to the colonial link, directed towards Indonesia. So that is still, there still is this link with the Netherlands. But you know, we of course realize pretty much that times have changed a lot. We are now a relatively small country in Europe, still rich, very rich. The Netherlands has been very adaptive to the changing circumstances. Under any circumstance, at a time when Indonesia was lost, as we call it, was lost to the Netherlands, many people predicted, or there was a saying, Indonesia lost, disaster begins. But it hasn't. But it was a difficult time also because of the end of the Cold War, of course. At the end of the Second World War. There was a lot of destruction in the Netherlands. Industry all broken down and so on. But the Netherlands managed to recover from that, and it's still in the top of the world. So in a way, I must say, we have a very adaptive culture, adaptive to any changing circumstance. But now I come to my conclusions, both for Indonesia, for the Netherlands. First of all, I would say, what is the long-term link for the Netherlands with Indonesia? Of course, all the past. It shows in individual lives. We don't have any family here in Indonesia. We never had. We are quite new to the relationship. It has influenced our life pretty much. I mean, we'll never go away during our life anymore. Maybe it will have an effect on our children, but before we didn't have it. But there are many families in the Netherlands that have, in any way, call it a blood linkage, family ties with Indonesia. There are statistics, but it's quite big. And of course, you've got people from Indonesia now living in the Netherlands. Of course, the Indos that I mentioned earlier, the people of mixed blood, Then you got many people from Maluku, still living in the Netherlands, who were serving in the colonial army, and then decided to choose for the Netherlands at the time of independence. Then you have many people who just migrate there to start a toko in some city in The Hague, just for economic purposes. Then you got all the students, thousands living there. So there's quite, at the personal level, there's quite a connection. Then of course you see the connection a lot, and well, tourism is big. Then you see it in scholarship still. Science here, I mentioned that. You see it in musea. I mentioned the Institute of the Tropics. Let me see. And of course there's this idea about tempo dulu. This idea that the past was very nice, very gezellig, at least for the colonialists. There's a lot of literature about this. There's this culture of memory in the Netherlands. What you see now that's really appearing is that some people think this nostalgia for tempo dulu is going a bit too far, and we should have more emphasis on the bad things that the Dutch did here. So there is now research going on in the Netherlands about atrocities in colonial times, especially at the time of independence, and having a new look at the history. That is, let's say, work in progress. But there's a reflection now, also because of the distance in time, a reflection on the Dutch past in Indonesia. And I think that is a discussion that will continue for a long time. But of course you see it in all kinds of things, in the language. When we say that's a lot of Susa, then all the Dutch will understand. Those kinds of words we use all the time in the Netherlands. But that's also the other way around. I mean, going from the influence of the Dutch on Indonesia, first of all, the country. Indonesia is a response to Dutch colonialism. It has never existed before. So that is, I think, by far the most important manifestation of the Dutch influence. But then you see it in the culture everywhere. Talking about the language, for us Dutch, it's so nice to go around and then see koelkast, handdoek, especially about cars. Then you see, I think somebody counted it, there are 2,300 Dutch words in Bahasa. Knalpot, all those words, it's all Dutch. But that's just, but if you really look at the great cultural movements in Indonesia, and I want to mention four that you see since independence, I must say none of the four have, that's one of the four. None of the four have any influence from the Dutch. I would say that it's really autonomous. And I think going around, I'm not talking to you here, and you are all educated and so on. And I hope we can have interesting discussions on all this, because you know, you are aware of the past, right? But if you go around many islands and you talk to people, most people have no idea that the Dutch were here in many ways. So, I mean, it has gone beyond the horizon of time. It's in the educated environment, in politics, of course. And any time when you need somebody to kick, the Dutch are ready to be kicked. I mean, your great day, the 17th of August, Independence Day, always comes with one day after in Jakarta Post an editorial of how bad the Dutch were. Because there's the connection, I mean, that's logical. At the embassy there are always a few people shocked. Look what they write about us. They say, oh, that was 25 years ago exactly the same. Those are the symbols, the routines of today. And I mean, we kicked out the Spanish 4 centuries ago. I mean, most people have forgotten that. But if that happened 70 years ago, we would do exactly the same. So I think, I always say to my colleagues, don't worry, I mean, this is part of it. And most of it is true as well. So why should we get upset about that? So, let's say your trends that are completely independent of the Dutch. So, would be first of all what I mentioned is Indonesianization or Indonesianization, however you call it. That is a very strong factor in this country. Of course, you are building Indonesia, and it has been a huge success. And each generation of leaders has contributed to that. Yesterday I called Indonesia a big success story. The first generation, Sukarno gave freedom. Second generation started development, Suharto. Third generation started reform towards a modern nation. You cannot do everything at the same time. It has to be in stages. In Indonesia, it goes very nicely through the different stages. You're really a model country in many ways. It's a country to be really proud of. Second, I would say it's a very global thing, urbanization. You see it everywhere in Indonesia. Big cities appearing. We are living in Jakarta. I mean, there's no end to Jakarta. And you see it elsewhere as well. It's not an Indonesian phenomenon really. You see it in Africa, you see it in Latin America, in the Middle East. It's happening everywhere. But people, for some reason, like the cities, economic opportunities, I guess, whatever. But that is something that is changing this country a lot. The third, well, let me mention it now because that is Islamization. That is very strong, much different from 25 years ago. That was on the Suharto. That was impossible. But now you see that very strongly. It's changing Indonesia also a lot. And number 4 is, I have to look, I became aware of that when I lived, I first came in November on my own. Family remained in the Netherlands for a while. And I lived in those towers in Mega Kuningan in Jakarta. You know that? Very modern. 25 years ago there was kampong. Now, yeah, it's now the kampong is cleared and they built those kind of skyscrapers, and it's a very comfortable living in there. But they advertise all the time, is say defining global living. And what do they mean with global living? That you go to the gym, that you eat Western, that you have Western music, and that you live there exactly the same as you would do in a tower in Shanghai, or in a tower in Sao Paulo in Brazil, or in a tower in Los Angeles or Tokyo. You don't know where you are anymore, because it's all the same. That is global living. That's a separate culture. But you see it for people with money here in Indonesia, it's kind of attractive. And so that is also a trend. That's kind of a trend to the West. You see a trend towards the Middle East. You see a trend towards becoming one. You see all those trends are, and you see all this is happening mainly in the city. Those are the main trends for Indonesia. It's changing the country very rapidly. It's sometimes combined in one person. It's not that one is going that way, the other is going that way, but you see the combinations all the time. But the point that I want to make, this is what I see after returning to Indonesia. But my point for this lecture is that none of them have to do with the Dutch. Indonesia is going its own separate way. Not apart from the world, linking to the world, linking to the different, even linking a little bit to the Netherlands. And we like to continue that. That's our work at the embassy, to keep the linkage with Indonesia as big and as possible, as positive as possible. That's our job. And we do that with great enthusiasm. But we see Indonesia is going its own way. That's only natural, You go your way, we go our way, and we like to be friends as long as possible. That's my story for now. Thank you. I see I got some more, the last slides. I just bring them just for 1 minute. This is The Hague, where the people from Indonesia, especially the Indos, have their festivals. First it was all called Pasar Malam, but also Tong Tong Fair. This is in the center of The Hague. This is the biggest Eurasian festival in the world. Where Dutch people, we always go there every year to eat and to have a look at dances and whatever. If you're in The Hague as a student or tourist, just go there if it's there. Indo Rock. Let me see what else is there. Yeah. Well, that's. Let's end with this fusion of Eurasia. Okay, this was my story. I promised we can have a debate or just a discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Van de Veen. We have another round of applause for. I think this is a very interesting topic, and I think it's very important for Indonesians because oftentimes we don't understand the extent of Dutch influence that still remains in our society, in our culture today. For instance, talking about food, I talk about how Indonesian food has affected the Netherlands, but there's a lot of Dutch food in Indonesia which I only realized when I was in the Netherlands.
The poffertjes.
Yes, a lot of our tradition of cookie making. We call this, every time we celebrate Muslim holidays, we bake goods. Our baked goods are a Dutch tradition, for instance. So there's a lot of aspects which hasn't really been discussed, and which I think is important in relation to also how we think about what are these kind of ways of thinking. And this is something which I think we can discuss, and also you guys can develop in your research later on. So we want to open. We have 20 minutes for discussion, and let's open it up for, first of all, 3 questions first. Can you mention your name and what are you studying?
I would like to speak in English, but I realize my English is not good, so I prefer to speak in Indonesia because saya mempunyai banyak gagasan yang tidak bisa dibicarakan dalam bahasa Inggris. There is my lecture in front of you, so then English will translate my Indonesia to English.
I think you can do very well in English. Yeah, try. I understand.
Yes, I will try to speak English. When I hear you talk about the Dutch came to Indonesia, but they not teach about their language, they not menyebarkan tanda kutip the religion in Indonesia. Why does the Dutch do that? They so different with other country like Spanish, like English, like other colonial country. When the colonial country like England, France, and each other, they if discovering land of colony, they will teach their language and any other. Why this is not why the Dutch not do like other country in Europe when they discovering the land of colony? Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you of the great lectures. It's really opening up about lots of cultural aspects in Indonesia and the Netherlands. And I have 2 questions actually. The first one is about maybe do you feel, in Indonesia itself, we feel that there's a rift or difference in Netherlands or Dutch influence in Indonesia, maybe because of like different period where the Dutch interacts with local indigenous people, or maybe like in the Moluccas pretty early, but then in Java and eventually other parts of the archipelago has a different period, and not just period. I mean the factors why Dutch came into those islands. I mean maybe in other parts of like Sumatra or Borneo, they entered into like economical factors when there's a shift in commercial goods from spices into industrial goods such as coals or oils or rubbers and plantations and such and stuff like that. And so I wonder if there's like a difference, your views, is there like a difference of a writ between the memories of Dutch interactions within the nations between islands because of periodizations and of time and factors and stuff like that. And the second one is actually an idea came from one of my lecturers in the class, and it's about a product, a really great product from Indonesia to the Netherlands in this interaction of transnationalism. It's about the introduction of multiculturalism in Dutch culture, and I want to know your views, your opinion about your opinion and views about the idea of like that. I'm sorry, first of all, my name is Ranga. I'm an undergraduate student at the History Department of the University of Gadjah Mada. Thank you very much for your lectures. Thank you.
My name is Ozi. My undergraduate in History, but my master in Sociology. My focus research in sociological story. So I want to share my framework from your presentation to interact with you, of course. From my track in history, in historical studies, when the changing the rulers from colonialism to independence to Sukarno and Suharto, the government institution that make a failure to translate psychological the person was invited from colonized. So the rights and obligation is not modernized in division of work, in lack of especially in post-reformation in Indonesia. So in the Indonesian society there is not capacity building to make the society to achieve social welfare from the state or from society, because the state, because the government institution is still feudal in their value. So
Are you saying feudal?
yeah, feudal in
Still today?
today. Because the status and role cannot objective to make empowering the capacity from the class, the low class, the poverty in the low class. So yes, I want to opinion from you, the framework from you, to make rights a good capacity building in Indonesia, in Indonesian society. Thank you very much.
Making my next appointments. We have a changing culture at the embassy. We always have to show what we do these days. Otherwise, they don't believe that I went to Jogja and actually spoke to you. So I have to ask somebody to make a few pictures. Here's my bag. Before you all go, I need a few pictures. Otherwise, nobody believes I'm here. You can send them on to mine, right? Yeah, from the back. Maybe you can give it. Okay, but then they were great questions indeed, and I will try to answer. You know, I'm not an expert on all this, but I give you my private opinion. It is certainly not the opinion of the government of the Netherlands. Let's say, when I talk here, I have my head, I have University of Amsterdam. So that makes me more free to answer what I want to say. The first is about what I mentioned at the beginning. The Dutch didn't want to spread their culture, their language, their religion. Why is that? Because for us, the main thing in life, maybe it makes us happy, I don't know, is to make money. And why is that? There are reasons for that. The main reason is the position of the Netherlands geographically. You can explain most countries by looking at a map. Because from your position geographically follow all the other things. Where is the Netherlands position? We are a small country between big countries. England, Germany, France and the sea. And we are at the end of many big rivers. So we're in a delta, meaning our soil is very fertile, we get good agriculture. We are between all the others, so we cannot play power politics, certainly not in Europe. We have to be friends with our big neighbors. So we keep it low, and we send our ships out to trade with everybody, because we get our agricultural products. There are big markets around the Netherlands and further away. That is what we do for our living. So it is our geographical position which made us traders from the start. And then looking at what others do, the experience of others, we don't care if you speak Dutch or Greek or Spanish or Indonesian, we don't care. We come there, we speak your language because that's what you like. Lebih baik bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia. Kalau orang Indonesia suka, kalau orang lain coba dalam bahasa Indonesia, mungkin lebih baik untuk tabar, untuk itu ya. Kalau Anda tidak marah tapi senang, kami tenang, bisa lebih baik untuk bikin profit. So that is our attitude. All Dutch people speak 6-7 languages. Because that is the best for us to operate in our environment. If you are big, you play power politics, you don't learn each other's language. The same with religion. If we would try to make all Protestants out of you, again, for us, who cares? You do whatever you like, it's your business. We got other motives, that's it. So we never came here with the idea to occupy the whole archipelago. And in fact, in the 19th century, when the empire was spreading, including Bali and the other islands, there was complaint from the central government in The Hague. What are you doing there? We don't want to have this, all this. The same happened in the British empires and so. But the explanation was, there was research on this, the explanation was people on the frontier did it, regardless of central policy. In the center, they thought it was far too expensive to have all the soldiers and occupy it all. But at the frontier, they always had problems with the people living on the other side of the frontier. For them, the easiest way was to invade the neighbors and put them under Dutch control. At the frontier, that was the most efficient solution. But in the capital, back home, they didn't like it. So the empire was built locally, not from the center. And so, in a way, at some point, The Hague suddenly realized we have an empire in the east. Can we still make money out of it? Because it can be costly. So, it's really, that was the main motive. If you remember that, then all the other things will fall in that position. The second question was really two, I remembered. Oh yeah, the periodization that first of all, the VOC merchants call it Empire Network. Sorry, there you are, right? And then the plantations for the coffee and tea and so on, and then finally industrial products or let's say natural resources. Do the Dutch realize all that? Well, yeah, the people who study, they know, and the most knowledgeable people about all this, about Indonesian history, sorry, they are in the Netherlands. Because most of the sources on all this is Dutch. We got very efficient administration. Whenever you got succeeded by somebody else, you had to write down exactly what is the situation in this part of the country, what is going on. It's all there in the archives in The Hague. So if you want to know about all the different things that happens here in Indonesia, you have to learn Dutch and you have to come to the archives in The Hague. It's all there. If you are a bit lazy or let's say not in a hurry, you wait until everything is translated and online. I guess a lot of it is online already. You can use Google Translate, although I'm not sure about the old, let's say, the old documents, if you can put them in Google Translate. 17th century Dutch, would you do that? Google, can you say something about that?
Well, I can say something. Well, forget about the archives, that everything is translated because they have miles of it and they can't put everything online. People always think that you can put everything online, but the archives, no, not. So you really have to go to The Hague, to the archive itself, and look at the original documents for this. Sorry about this.
Our marriage, when it comes to history, is divided in one who does archives and one who just tells stories. Margreet really knows the archives here, and she also teaches Old Dutch to Indonesian students who like to know about it. So
I can tell some more.
Oh,
sorry. I myself am also a lecturer in the University of Amsterdam. But I'm also a program officer in Leiden University for a student exchange program. And well, I'm also working now with PhD students in Leiden who come there under LPDP scholarship or a restricted scholarship. And well, that I'm here, it's more like a coincidence. But I really want to ask you if there are some of you who would like to do their STIGA in Leiden or in Holland. I'm here now for information. So if there are some of you who would like to do that, or after the MA pursue to write your dissertation, I'm here and you can just bump an outcome. And I can just see what I can do for you. So that's for the students here are so interested now in Dutch history or in Japanese history or Indonesian history or linguistic that they will continue, or some anthropology topic. I'm here to give information.
thank you. So we are still we are still selling our country, still making a profit. Because, you know, until very recently, all the students that came to the Netherlands were paid from Development Corporation. The Dutch paid for it, like an investment in the future. These days, Indonesia has become so rich that well, all relatively, they pay for their own scholarships. Ristikdikti, LPDP, you got many. So it's a big market these days, scholarships. So, but we are still the best, so come to the Netherlands. Well, no, I'm not kidding. Critical thinking, that is something that you can learn in the Netherlands, not elsewhere. So that is what I got. Top ranking still. I still got two questions to go. Sorry. Multiculturalism and capacity building. Yes, you could say the start of multiculturalism in the Netherlands was with the coming of people from Indonesia. the Indos, the Moluccans, others. After that, people from Suriname. When Suriname became independent, half of the population went to the Netherlands. And then after that, what we call the guest laborers from Spain, Portugal, and after that from Turkey and Morocco. Yeah, it's the start. It's a complicated story because it has advantages, broaden your horizon and so on, but the integration into the local culture is not without problems. And certainly these days, because the people that come to the Netherlands or to Europe in general have a very different culture, very different religion, usually no motivation to integrate, and this is reaching its limits. You see it, it has become a real political issue everywhere in Europe. So yes, the Netherlands and other European countries have become very multicultural. It started indeed with Indonesia. Indonesia itself in this discussion is not an issue because people from Indonesia had this linkage with the Netherlands and want to integrate like the country. Other way, the Dutch like the Indonesians. We talked about that. That is not an issue. But with other newcomers and very large numbers, not knowing where they go, not accepting the Dutch culture, that is a problem. Yeah. So that is a political issue these days, and it's far from over. The last question is capacity building. Where are you? Yeah, sorry. I wouldn't call it feudalism these days. Of course, Indonesia has not modernized totally. You see, many of the old ways, call it patronage. Patronage is something that exists also in the Netherlands. Patronage will never completely disappear. Just being patron over some other people who will then support you, this give and take thing that exists, and it's very close to corruption, it's very close to many other things. It all exists here. But Indonesia is modernizing rapidly. Feudalism is a concept that does not apply to Indonesia these days. Maybe on one or two of the far out islands, I don't know. But when coming back after 25 years and comparing Indonesia now with 25 years ago, you see huge improvements. It's a great ways forward from then. Again, Indonesians can be very proud of that. Of course, not all the problems have been solved, and one of the big issues is the problem between rich and poor. Clearly it is. Capacity building can do a lot there, and I've seen capacity in Indonesia grow tremendously. 25 years ago, a room full of these educated people, or people being educated, well, did not exist, but it was very different, I can tell you. I see it also in the embassy. I travel now with Leo, is one of the local staff, highly educated, both here at UGM and at Leiden University. He speaks his languages, he knows his way around, he knows history, all that. We got other local staff at the embassy exactly the same. They are what we used to call in Europe YUPs, young urban professionals. You see them a lot in Indonesia. 25 years ago, it didn't exist. So, okay, you may be still short of capacity, high qualified capacity, but it's there, it's growing. And this is work in process. So don't be too negative about that. I see the huge improvements over the years. So
I'm not negative, but I'm skeptical for the zero in Sukoharjo, in Bukidul. The general description, they are not recognized the industrial revolution 40 years ago, the example. So cannot generalize
But is there a connection with the Dutch also? This is local development, right? Indonesian development.
Yeah, I thought the government institution still
maybe this is something you can discuss later after the show, because I'm proud of the Reformasi so far. I really enjoyed the presentation, and the discussions have been very interesting, and we should give another round of applause for
Thanks very much, and good luck to all of you with your studies and later on in life.
So I want to conclude the ground back lecture for today, and please come again for the next ground back lecture. I don't know when, but we do have a lot of those. Thank you.